tossers have thrown it out the door with their behaviour this week. They should be ashamed of themselves. They should absolutely look at themselves in the mirror and wonder what the have they been doing. They're hissing at us and calling us cheats in the Lord's long room, and they have the gall to say, talk to us about the spirit of cricket. Absolute bullshit.
There's a big appeal, it's hit him on the pad, he's out! Lions gone, New South Wales are 9 down! Onto Sydney Road, and it hit a car! Oh, I think it's hit a car! What a way to bring up your 50!
All you want is to leave it all behind. Now there is a simple remedy to stay fit for all eternity.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Cricket Unfiltered podcast. Australia have humiliated the West Indies, bowling them out for their the second lowest test score in history and the West Indies' lowest test score. So they bowled them out for just 27. And I stuck the boot into the West Indies yesterday saying this series wasn't a good ad for test cricket. This series was a good ad for those arguing for two-tier test cricket. But it has just got worse today with the West Indies bowled out in under 15 over in embarrassing circumstances. Mitchell Starc, Scott Boland and the Australians ran riot in what can only be described as a farce. I mean, this was terrible stuff from the West Indies. And, I'm going to go through all the records, but, people are praising the West Indies fast bowlers. I mean, how well did they really do? Clearly, these conditions were so bad for batting in all three test matches, and hard to read much into the batting performances of the Australians, and hard to really praise the West Indies fast bowlers too much because the conditions were just so much in the bowlers' favours. I mean, Australia bowled the West Indies out for 27. I mean, Australia made, 120 odd in their second innings. So way outperformed the West Indies. So, yeah, amazing stuff for the Australians and humiliation for the West Indies at home, bowled out for 27. Their previous lowest score was 47 at that same ground. So it has just been a day to forget for West Indies cricket, but a memorable one for Australian fans. I mean, this test match has been fantastic with the time difference. I've been waking up in the morning, heater on, watching the cricket from 4:30 a.m. And actually, I woke up a bit late today and I missed the first ball. I got up like 4:40 and Green was already out. He was bowled first ball of the day, just shouldering arms to Shamar Joseph. Incredible. But anyway, let me go through the cavalcade of records that Australia ticked off today because it was spellbinding viewing. So for those that missed it live, in the first session, 10 wickets fell, the last 4 Australian wickets. Then at lunch, the West Indies was 6 for 20. And then, at the first break, because it's not lunch, it's just the 20-minute break. And then after the 20-minute break, Australia took the last 4 wickets very, very quickly, and the West Indies crashed to an embarrassing defeat. So Mitchell Starc, he took 6 for 9 in the test in this second innings. It's his 16th 5-wicket haul. He took 3 wickets in the first over. It was a triple wicket maiden to start proceedings. He had 4 for 0 at one stage, and he brought up his 400th wicket, taking that 4th wicket. So he had 4 for 0, brought up 400 wickets. And that 400 wickets, I read a great stat on Cricinfo. He's the second fastest bowler ever behind Dale Steyn to 400 wickets in terms of balls bowled in Test cricket. And, you look at one of the things of being part of this fantastic attack, that Starc, Hazlewood and Cummins and Lyon, they do take wickets off each other. I mean, you think about it, Pat Cummins didn't even get a bowl today. You can imagine what he would have done in those conditions. So Starc, 400th test wicket. He's got 4 for none at this stage. And his 3 wickets in the first over means he's taken 23 wickets in the first over of a test match. Quite incredible. Starc then had his 5th wicket, and he had figures of 5 for 2 after 2.3 overs, which is crazy. And he broke the record for the fastest ever 5-wicket haul in Test cricket. It took him just 15 balls to take 5 wickets. 3 players had done it in 19 balls. Ernie Toshak, Stuart Broad in that infamous spell in 2015, and then Scott Boland at the G back in 2020. Yeah, he took his 5 wickets off just 19 balls as well. So Stark beat the record by 4 deliveries. Interesting on that list, it is dominated by Australians. Shane Watson took a 5-wicket haul in just 21 wickets. And I think most people will remember this match. It was the all-out 47 game for Australia in South Africa in 2011. And Josh Hazlewood took only 25 balls to take 5 wickets against India in that infamous 36 all-out at Adelaide. So it was just a series of records for Mitchell Starc. I mean, what a way to celebrate your 100th test. He was also player of the match and player of the series. So the West Indies, they were all out for 27. Their lowest ever score, the second ever lowest in history and the lowest since 1955. Some great stats here from Quick Info. Across their 2 innings, the West Indies only made 170 runs. That is the lowest they've ever made in a test match where they were bowled out twice. Their previous lowest was 175 back in 1957. They batted 14.3 overs, which is the 3rd lowest innings in test cricket in terms of balls faced. The lowest is 12.3 overs by South Africa back in 1924. And the second lowest is 13.5 overs by Sri Lanka against South Africa last November. And then in the West Indies' second innings, there were 7 ducks. That is the first ever instance of 7 batters getting out for a duck in a test innings. The first ever instance. Another slice of history the West Indies will want to forget. And then here's a really good one. The 6 runs collectively added by the West Indies' top 6 batters in the second innings is comfortably the lowest of any team's top 6 batters in a men's test innings. It is half the previous lowest of 12, which is by Australia against England in Sydney in 1888. I mean, this is just a nightmare show for the West Indies. Carl Hooper was basically crying on the radio. I mean, let me just read it out. Let me just read out the scorecard. John Campbell out first ball of the innings for a duck. Mikhail Lewis out LBW to Mitchell Starc. Kevlon Anderson LBW to Mitchell Starc for a duck. Brandon King bowled Mitchell Starc for a duck. So Campbell goes and Kevlon Anderson just pads up to a ball that is on middle stump swinging back in a half volley. So he's given out LBW. For some reason, then he refers it. I'm not sure why he referred it because it was never missing anything but middle stump. And then Brandon King got a good ball first up, although he was pushing wide of his body. He's bowled for a duck. Roston Chase also made a duck. Hazelwood got in the action there. And then 3 ducks to end the innings. So just one player in double figures, Justin Greaves, made 11. 2 players made 4. 1 player made 2, and the rest were ducks. Unbelievable. So that is the diabolical story of the West Indies batting. 7 ducks, 6 runs by the top 6. In this score, Sam Constant actually dropped 2 catches. It could have been way worse for the West Indies. One was a tough one to his right, but then the second one he probably should have held, and Mitchell Starc wasn't happy when Constant dropped that one. And then when the West Indies were 9 for 26, equal with the lowest ever test score in history, Constant misfielded a ball to give them 1 run and let them off the record. So not a good test match for Sam Constant. And then if that wasn't enough, so we had Mitchell Starc running right. Scott Boland decides, okay, don't forget about me. I'm going to take a test hat trick. So he gets a test hat trick, gets who does he get? He gets Greaves, Shamar Joseph, and Warrican in 3 consecutive deliveries. He's the 10th Aussie to take a test hat trick, the 12th time it's happened for an Australian men's team. So that's the 10th Aussie man to do it in test cricket. 2 Australian women have done it in test cricket. It's the first Australian to take a test hat trick since Peter Siddle back in 2010-11. And just breathtaking stuff from Boland. I mean, he comes in for this test match and just destroys the opposition with a hat trick. He's now taken 62 test wickets with a test average of 16.53 and a strike rate of a wicket every 6 overs. It's quite incredible. When conditions are in his favour, he is unstoppable. So Boland takes a hat trick. and the West Indies are destroyed. So Stark finishes 6 for 9, Hazelwood 1 for 10, Scott Boland 2 overs, 3 for 2. West Indies all out 127. They lose the game by 176 runs, a commanding victory for Australia. Just sort of wrapping up this morning, as I said, Australia started the day 6 down. Cameron Green was out, first ball of the day, shouldering arms. He was bowled. That made the score 7 for 99. And then Australia were eventually all out for 121. Mitchell Stark hit 11, not out, so he wasn't dismissed in that second innings. And Alzari Joseph with the figures 5 for 27 for the West Indies. Shamar Joseph 4 for 34. But, you have to look at those figures in the conditions. I mean, Australia, same conditions, bowled the West Indies out for 27. So, yeah, probably not a good game for the batters. And also Cricinfo had an interesting stat that Steve Smith was the highest scorer in this match. He made 48. That is only the 16th time in tests that no player has made a 50, and 9 of these came before 1900. So that just gives you an idea of how difficult the batting conditions were in this test match, that the highest score was 48. And very rarely happens in Test cricket that no one makes a half century. So, this was a commanding performance by the Australians. How often can you say that Pat Cummins doesn't even get a bowl in Australia's, in the West Indies' second innings? And this will be a morning that Australian fans never forget, because Australia just absolutely demolished the West Indies. And incredible stuff. 14.3 overs, just spellbinding. And what a way for Mitchell Stark to celebrate his 100th Test match. He's devastating with the pink ball, but for him to just go through the West Indies like that, and that first over, you could go away and make a cup of tea and come back in the West Indies with 3 for zip. I mean, it was just unstoppable stuff. And I'm going to do a full podcast this week with Damien where we sort of look into the stats of the series and go into the performances of the Australian batting lineup. But I think all in all, you have to take into account that these were very, very difficult conditions to bat for the Australian batters. And I don't know if that's an excuse for Khawaja, but definitely an excuse for Constas and some of the other batters. And in this test match, Cameron Green with a pair of 40s, in an invaluable contribution. And I think we saw, whether Green's a number 3 or not, I'm still not sold on that, but he's definitely shown he's ready for the Ashes and in some good form. So just a day for the statisticians to go wild. I mean, so many records broken. I think the records that stand out to me, obviously we had the Boland hat trick, which is not a record, but another Victorian takes a test hat trick. It's just Victorians that do it for Australia. Warren, Siddle, Hughes, Fleming. I don't know what it is with Victorians and test hat tricks, but they love it. But I think the one that stands out to me is Stark taking the fastest ever 5-wicket haul in Test cricket. To have figures of 5 for 2 after 15 balls, it's like playing schoolboy cricket. So Australia win the series 3-0, convincing win. I think this series has been pretty poor, if I'm honest. I think the batting conditions didn't make for a very good spectacle. People are saying, it was great to see the West Indies fast bowlers do well. That's fine, but I thought this series was just a terrible ad for Test cricket and a forgettable series in terms of competitiveness. I thought making it so difficult for the batters took away from the spectacle. I think there needed to be middle ground. I would have liked to have seen a little bit more friendly batting conditions. I don't mean highways, but just to see this series completely dominated by the ball. And just all in all, a pretty rubbish Test series. People are speculating this might be the last time Australia ever tours the West Indies in Test cricket. And look, I don't want that to happen, but if it is to happen, this is a terrible way for it to end. And, embarrassment for the West Indies. They're humiliated in this Test match, bowled out for 27. And, I noticed at the end, I think Seals was the last player out, and Mitchell Stark didn't give him a send-off, but it was almost just he was such a condescending sort of gloat. He just sort of pointed at him and smiled like, you guys suck. Like, you guys were sledging us and giving it to us in the field, but you guys suck. And I'm about to, we've just bowled you out for 27. All right, so that's a couple of questions and a couple of comments from yesterday's video before I wrap up this wrap of day 3. Still buzzing. I mean, just all those wickets so quickly. It's almost too much for me to handle. But Raji's has made a point that my description of Smith's dismissal was light on. So this is the dismissal in the second innings where he sort of played wide of his body and inside edge one onto his stump. Raji says Smith was pinned on the crease because of some hostile fast short deliveries and was out pushing tentatively. England will look at that as a potential playbook. Look, Raji, appreciate the email, the message, but that's just farcical commentary. I mean, it's just not true. The fact is Smith was struggling to pick up the pink ball in those conditions. He said it. It just wasn't easy to see the pink ball. The lights weren't great in the West Indies, and I think that's the only reason he was pinned to the crease. Oh, look, there was very good fast bowling, and I'm sure the English will try a bit of short stuff to Smith, but I don't think that was the reason for his dismissal in that second innings. It was just pink ball under lights, hard to see, and he was a bit tentative. JC, thoughts on Constance, how to get him back on track? Well, as I said, let's take his series into context that this has been a very difficult series for batters, and a really interesting article from Robert Craddock today in the News Corp papers that, the selectors, and I'm going to keep saying it, they missed a huge opportunity in Sri Lanka. They were good batting conditions there. They could have played Constance and allowed him to get some confidence at test level. And instead they got too cute for themselves. They thought the West Indies would be easier batting. They get to the West Indies and it was very difficult batting conditions, and they've fried this poor kid. And I would just say the selectors have got this wrong. They've just got this whole opening batting thing wrong in the last couple of years. They get a lot right, but they've stuffed this up. After those two tests against the Indians, they had to play Constance in Sri Lanka. And moreover, Australia had already qualified for the World Test Championship final. So they weren't effectively dead rubbers, but they were effectively certainly dead in terms of the World Test Championship context. And you could definitely say, well, we're going to play Constance here and give him some experience. And Crash made a good point that they just completely botched that up. They should have played him in the featherbed. They've got too cute with some of their selections. The Aussie team, I mean, you look back to 2023 when they left Travis Head out of that first test in India. I mean, they get a lot right, but they've got this one wrong, horribly wrong. Devastatingly wrong, and now Australia are in a real pickle heading into the Ashes. I think Khawaja will survive, unfortunately, and I don't expect him to have a good Ashes. I just think he's done. So anyway, look, we're going to get into all that. I'll get into all that with Damien when we wrap up this series. But for those waking up, you have missed one of the all-time performances by our Australian bowling attack. Australia started the day 6 down. They were bowled out for 121. They were 6 for 99, so they added 22 runs, and then they set the West Indies 204, and the West Indies were bowled out for just 27. Their lowest test score. Stark the Destroyer, 6 for 9, the fastest ever 5-wicket haul in Test cricket. He had a triple wicket maiden to start the innings off. The West Indies were 3 for none. Then they were 4 for 5. Then they were 6 for 11. And then they slight recovery to 7 for 26. And then Boland took his hat trick and then one more run before Stark finished it off. So the Australian team have managed to give themselves most of the third day off. So a very quick pink ball test match, 2.5 days and all over. Congratulations to the Aussies. And I'll be back later in the week with a full episode.